you very much, Dr. Anil. Hi, everyone. My name is Vidya. I'm the CEO and co-founder of FitBots. FitBots with the passion of taking OKRs to organizations globally. So we're really a total OKR partner for our clients, having both OKRs as platform, which helps teams manage OKRs. But one of the realizations was that not everything can be with software. So we also have a network of OKR coaches who help teams get comfortable and set up OKRs and get it right first. Before FitBots, I had a corporate life, much like many of you who are listening into this conversation. I led performance in leadership building for a billion-dollar company called Mindtree and rolled out practices for over 20,000 worldwide. That's where I realized that there is a lot which is going on when it comes to driving high performance. And with a focus on teams, you can do a lot more. There are organizations out there, of course, like Google, LinkedIn, and Twitter, which were growing at a very frenetic pace. And it got me curious, and I realized that they were all using OKRs. So me and my co-founder, Kashi, who we both happen to work in the same companies, we said, hey, let's do something about this and let's build the platform experience. But along with the platform, let's really help teams to get it right. I'm also a certified OKR coach. So the first 250 teams were coached by us so that we understand from the experience of working closely with how exactly OKRs are rolled out on the ground. And from that, we build the organization to where it is today. So in this conversation, I would like to share a lot more about what are OKRs and how is it that OKRs are probably similar or very different from many of the practices that we've been used to in the past. So let's get started by talking a little bit what exactly are OKRs. Much to the contrary of what teams actually believe, OKRs is actually a strategy execution framework. While it's confused many a time with individual performance and how do we use OKRs to link it tightly with compensation, it's actually a framework to drive business velocity. So what do I mean by that? OKRs is actually an acronym. O stands for objectives, KRs are key results, and tasks are the initiatives which actually make things happen and help you move towards the outcomes. So the way we like to think about OKRs is there's really a 5-point definition around OKRs. Foremost, that OKRs helps you build critical thinking in your organization. So I'm not sure what critical thinking means to any of us on the call, but what it means to us is to move the organization from moving by a feel to moving to facts, which means moving from intuition to moving to decisions which are made by data. And this is done not only by leadership teams, but teams across the organization. The second important point around OKRs is that it's not about setting and forgetting. So we've worked with many teams who actually put a lot of effort in writing high quality OKRs, but it's not about that. It's about managing OKRs. So it's definitely not set and forget, but really about building that muscle and cadence. The third important element of OKRs is that it's not a business as usual framework, which means if you're building OKRs around what you were anyway doing as part of your day jobs, then it's not an effective OKR journey. So OKRs should be something new, something different, something which is leading to change, growth, or innovation. The fourth important discussion about OKRs with other frameworks is that it is not only about vertical alignment. In traditional goal management frameworks, vertical alignment is something that we get very easily. But in OKRs, it's about bidirectional alignment, which is product talking to engineering? Are they talking to customer success, marketing stuff? And are these teams all coming together to drive a high velocity? The last point around OKRs is that everything should be quantified. What do I mean by that? OKRs is about making everything objective, which means if metrics are not quantified, then you would not be able to lead by facts. So I'm going to talk to you now about how OKRs are different from traditional performance practices. But before we get there, just wanted to share a little bit about what are some of the books that you could make as part of your personal repertoire if you're passionate about OKRs. The first is the book by John Doerr, which is called Measure What Matters. This is a bestseller, which is very, very popular because it's got a culmination of stories around OKRs, right from how Bono, famously known from the band, to to Bill Gates Foundations, and many, many organizations, including, of course, Google, have set OKRs and scaled their companies using OKRs. So that's a great read around OKRs. The second is a book called Objectives and Key Results by Paul Niven and Ben Lamotte. And this is essentially a great book if you're looking to champion OKRs in your organization and get it right, especially when you're looking to implement it across different teams and different business units. So very, very good read, and I would highly recommend having both these books as part of your personal repertoire. Now, if these books are probably about 3.5 to 4 years old, the question that we are often asked as OKR coaches is OKRs new? Is this probably a 4-year-old framework? And is this a shiny new penny of management? And the answer is absolutely no, because OKRs actually borrows from a 50-year pedigree of best practices. So the evolution of OKRs actually started in the 1950s, which is where the management guru, Peter Drucker, who coined management by objectives. It starts from there, then it went on to being adopted in Intel in the 1970s, where Andy Grove, who was then the CEO and later on became the chairman, adopted OKRs. If you go onto YouTube, you'll see an amazing video by Andy Grove as he turns around to his team and says, objectives is what exactly would you like to accomplish, and key results are, hey, is it done or not done? It helps you measure success. So I would highly recommend you going and looking up that YouTube video. From there, it went on to Google in the 1990s, where John Doerr took it to Google when they were about a 40-member team. And from there, even today, when Google is over 60,000, 70,000 Googlers worldwide, they still continue using OKRs. In fact, it's how they do business is through OKRs. And from there, it went on to hundreds of Silicon Valley companies and very, very frenetically growing in Asia Pacific as well. So now that we understand a little bit about how OKRs have evolved over decades, let's spend a little bit of time in contrasting OKRs with performance management practices. And this is not to say that one is better than the other, but really it borrows from certain principles which makes OKR effective if it's used correctly. Let me start with the first one. It starts with how OKRs are written. Now, in performance practices, which many of us are probably used to in the past, individuals and managers come together to write goals. But in OKRs, it's best written as a team. So OKRs is a shift from me to we. When teams come together to pick the right high-quality metrics, that's when OKRs become highly successful. The second and important difference between traditional practices and OKRs is that the performance management practices in the past are essentially KRA or linked to roles. However, in OKRs, it's linked to the strategic goals or the strategic themes of the organization. So irrespective of who contributes to OKRs, they're all looking at the North Star and linking to strategy. In performance management practices, we usually do not have a limit to the number of KPIs that we select, but in OKRs, it's a focus on the vital few rather than the trivial many. So cherry picking OKRs is important. So we usually recommend a 3x5, which is not more than 3 objectives and not more than 5 KRs each. Another important difference is the movement from managing by tasks or inputs to managing by outcomes. So many a time in performance conversations, you may find that your teams come up to you and say that, hey, I've written 5 blogs and I've run a bunch of Google Ad campaigns, or I've probably written a process document to ensure that the onboarding experience of my new employees is great. Now, those are actually managing by tasks. But really, the moment that you would want for your organization is how do you really manage by outcomes. So in OKRs, it's a shift from inputs to outcomes, which is, are you really moving the needle on key metrics which impact this? The next important point on OKRs is about cadence. So in OKRs, we do weekly cadence. So every week, teams coming together, much like agile teams, and reporting progress against their outcome metrics. But in performance practices of the past, while it was moved into a more frequent basis in many organizations, there are still a fair share of organizations who either do a mid-year or annual review. And much of that is post facto. The next important element around OKRs is transparency. That's because OKRs are actually visible to each other, irrespective of the team that we represent. We are actually able to go and pull out the OKRs of other teams because they're all cross-functionally aligned, and the input from one team impacts the outcome of another. In traditional practices of performance, you would notice that it's usually between the team member and the manager, and it's probably seen within the department or in a system where only the manager and team member can see it. While we do have many organizations who have actually made goals a lot more visible, in OKR, it's not only about the OKRs being visible, but also the progress against them. So everybody is able to see the actual progress against the metrics which have been selected. Reporting in OKRs is in a common format. So again, irrespective of the team or the key results that one is owning, everybody reports progress in the same format. But in performance practices, you would notice that the dashboards are very different across teams, but here there's a lot of standardization as to how teams can report progress. The next very interesting element of OKRs is that it's soft-linked with compensation and variable pay, and sometimes de-linked. Now, this could be tricky, and especially since you're managing human resources, you would find that this kind of gets into a state of dilemma. However, when you look at OKRs being soft coupled, there's a reason to that. It's because when you soft couple OKRs, you're actually trying to get teams to take something which is very aspirational. And when you tight link it with compensation and variable pay, it'll go on to the old behaviors of taking very, very safe goals. And OKRs is actually about stretch and about building something which is inspirational and aspirational. So it kind of goes against that philosophy if you tight link it with compensation. In many organizations that we work with who run their business and business velocity on OKRs, it's soft linked with conversations around performance where OKRs becomes one of the input but not the only input. And finally, the measures around OKRs are a combination of lead and lag indicators. This is very important so that it has an impact on business.
What makes an organization successful in terms of implementation of OKR? What are some of the identifiable characteristics, and then are there any signals where organizations should absolutely stay away from OKR in terms of their people process maturity or mindset? If it is not aligned, should we also, stand up and say that, hey, let's not do it right now because we are not ready?
Yeah, absolutely. And before we work with organizations, in fact, this is the first question that we ask as to what's the driver for adopting OKRs, why OKRs, why not? So if the response is, if Google has done it, so can we, or it's made some other organizations grow and hence we're adopting OKRs, that's definitely not a great reason. However, if the reason is that we wish to use OKRs to actually drive radical clarity within our teams or to change or grow the business, or we're facing a disruption and we want to counter it by making our teams extremely agile, those are some of the reasons or good reasons for adopting OKRs. At the time or the timing to adopt OKRs is not cast in stone. We find that many organizations actually come for rolling out OKRs a couple of months before the beginning of the financial year. We also have a fair share of teams who come somewhere mid-cycle and they want to pilot OKRs for a few teams before they roll it out to the entire organization. But amidst all this, the key to rolling out OKRs is sponsorship. CEOs and founders of companies are the best sponsors of OKRs. They're the best cheerleaders of OKRs because it's they who would help drive the culture and make it a language, not only as part of their communication to teams, but also as part of their leadership reviews. So when you run your organizations giving OKRs the importance it needs, then it becomes your tool and it would aid you in driving the business velocity.
How does one go about, let's say that, there is leadership sponsorship or CEO sponsorship, everything is fine and the people are gung-ho about really bringing out a change, a visible value addition to the company. How does one make a move? Or if you could just also help my viewers know about the process steps, how one moves from point A to point B.
So one of the temptations, as soon as we listen into, let's say, a concept like OKRs, is to say, okay, let's start writing OKRs. That's the first temptation. That's an absolute no-no, because before you roll out OKRs, the first element is to really prepare the organization to accept OKR. So I've just used a model called the Prochaska model of change, and there are essentially 5 stages to it. So there's the pre-contemplation where the organization is still not ready, and then there's the contemplation stage where they're getting ready, and from their preparation to action to maintenance. If you look at any of these change management frameworks, it actually tells you how to take it progressively so that you're able to condition the ecosystem before introducing OKRs. It's very similar to introducing any other change management within your context. So before you roll out OKRs, there are essentially 5 elements to this. The first and foremost is on sponsorship, where CEOs, as I mentioned, are the best sponsors and the best cheerleaders for OKRs. The second is about establishing the context, which is why OKRs, why now? What's that message around why OKRs are important, and sharing that message with everybody in the organization to say that this is the reason why we're adopting OKRs and this is why we're doing that now. The third important element before rolling out OKRs is to identify an internal OKR champion. The internal OKR champion is actually an internal change agent, somebody who's like an internal coach to teams, ensures that the right people who are starting OKRs are on board and they are able to select the right metrics, which is going to impact business. More like an internal coach and influencer to ensure that they're able to take it not only through the 90 days, but during the course of the year. So the internal OKR champion is probably one of the most critical roles in an OKR rollout. The next is about ambassadors. The last thing the champion would want is to spend a lot of time and energy in rolling out OKRs and not having buy-in. Ambassadors are best played by business leaders, be it an organization which is a startup, a high-growth venture, a mid-sized company or a large enterprise, irrespective of what size you are at. It's important to have ambassadors who are actually moving OKRs across conversations. So imagine if you have a business leader who comes and says, hey, don't focus on OKRs, just focus on the business's usual metrics. And that's not a very healthy conversation to have. So you would want to ensure before you start OKRs to identify business leaders who are also ambassadors internally. And finally, of course, the software, because it's also about managing this effectively across the course of your rollout. Let's say you're a team of about 8 and you're introducing OKRs. You could manage it on a spreadsheet, but teams of 20 and above essentially manage OKRs using a software. And that will help them track and share meaningful insights.
In terms of software, you just spoke about that. Could you also give examples of few companies, few softwares in specifically OKR space, which are popular, which my viewers can really evaluate?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say FitBots is right on top of that because we are a SaaS company with the OKR platform. So I'll probably talk a little bit about the elements of an OKR software that you may want to evaluate before you select one. I think the first and foremost is that the OKR software should be simple and intuitive because it's very important for teams who are probably grappling with understanding OKRs. The last thing that you would want is to use a software which is not intuitive. So something which is simple and intuitive is what would help teams. The second is the software is not about cascade, but it's about connect and align. So OKRs, unlike other performance practices, is not about cascading OKRs from the company level to the next level. So when you actually write OKRs, while you set company OKRs, because that's the North Star, teams come together, look at the company OKRs and craft their own objectives and key results, cherry pick their own metrics, which they believe will move the needle on the company OKRs. So if the key result of a company becomes the objective of the next level team, then that's a cascade. So what you would want is teams coming together and connecting and aligning. And most OKR softwares out there have visual boards, which will help you clearly see the linkages between one team to another. The third thing is about insights, because as you're actually getting the OKR updates done, integrations are of course important with the work tools so that data flows seamlessly, but it's also important that teams get insights. So some of the insights that you may want to watch out for are key results coming at risks? Are there some key results which are moving faster than others? Or are there some key results where the confidence index, in OKRs there's something called the confidence index that teams update on a week-on-week basis. Are there some KRs which are low on confidence so that managers, leaders within the teams can come and support and help in moving it forward? So I think these 3-4 elements you may want to keep in mind before you evaluate an OKR software.
Typically, the problem that all of us we grapple with is, when we introduce any kind of a performance management system, and more so during the times of OKR consideration, revenue generating functions, it's not a challenge. But the moment I talk about enabling function, the bigger question is, okay, these are all very qualitative. In your experience, have you come across any best practices, or are there any tips and tricks that you would like to share with HR leaders, HR professionals, how to go about it and how to address this quantification challenge?
Yeah, that's a great question. And going back to the fifth principle around OKRs is that everything needs to be objective. If it's not measurable, then it's not a good key result. So the way I've seen HR teams come together to set high quality OKRs is, the first is to ask what's the business problem that we're solving. And that business problem is, of course, not in isolation. So let's say, I'll give an example of an organization which post-COVID had this challenge of increasing employee engagement because teams were, of course, dispersed. So what HR did was, HR was part of the conversations of OKR writing, but they did it along with the business teams. And one of the key results which they took was around skill development, where they essentially said that they would want to increase the number of salespeople from X to Y, because key results always move from X to Y, and get them upskilled on virtual selling as a new capability. So by making it objective and saying that we're going to increase the coverage of virtual sales selling programs among our sales team members from X to Y in total, that became a linked key result with sales, because it was important for sales to actually have all their sales teams upskilled on virtual selling, and HR became a key stakeholder. Now, what's different about this is that both sales and HR set this key result together. They both had a different set of activities for each of the members in HR or sales who were anchoring the virtual sales program, but they both moved towards the same North Star of increasing the number of salespeople in virtual sales program from X to Y. So they looked at the same outcome metric. You would find that HR teams also have something that we call the milestone-based key results. Milestone-based key results are a little different. They are a little different from the metric key results that we've seen, where they're trying to launch certain programs in a quarter. And that's something which is very akin to HR roles, because we need to launch programs, because there's always this element of design, development and deployment which happens in HR teams, because there are always new practices to be rolled out. So those come under the purview of something that we call the milestone key results. Milestone key results many a time have a date. They may not take 90 days, but they may take 45 to 60 days. So let's say launch a talent program for enabling managers as coaches. That's fairly qualitative. So the way to make that objective is to again further divide it into key milestones. So for instance, the first milestone can be designing the coach program, the talent program for coaches. The second milestone can be testing out the MVP in a small group, and finally doing a beta launch. So when you divide it into milestones, then you're able to give weightages to each of the milestones and also measure progress. You're still able to report it objectively, while it's something that we call a milestone or a qualitative key result. So there are different shades of OKRs when you actually roll it out, but I've seen HR teams take a good share of metric-based as well as milestone-based. As you rightly said, learning is on the number of hours, the coverage, and a lot of that has been done. But one other way of thinking about HR key result is identify a business problem. So let's say a business has the problem of churn. And one of the key results at the company level is to reduce customer churn from, let's say, 15% to 8%. So you're trying to decrease customer churn so that more customers stay, and of course, you're able to land and expand your business. So with such a key result which is there, the way customer success in HR would look at it is, HR will come up and say, hey, what can I do to reduce customer churn? And then form key results around it. So they may say that, okay, to reduce customer churn, somebody from talent acquisition will come and say that I need to identify the right universities from where we probably have got talent in the past and they've stayed longer, and probably do more hiring from some universities or some sources where they've got past. One key result for them will be, again, very, very focused, increase sourcing from, let's say, XYZ university from X% to Y%, or 10 last year to 20 this year. So you're again going very focused on where you've got past success and then building a key result around it. So that's one way of doing it. HR can also say that we've had success in, let's say, talent when we have hired from internal sourcing. So one of the key results that they can build is increase internal sourcing from, let's say, 15% to 30%, which means your external sources like consultants who bring talent pool would reduce. And go one step further and say it's specifically through reference. And similarly, they can have something around reduction of attrition. But instead of broad basing it to say that, okay, we are going to reduce people attrition from 20% to, let's say, 12%, you can again make it very, very specific to say that in this quarter or the next 2-3 quarters, because attrition is not a problem that you can solve in a quarter. Let's say that maybe the people who are here for a tenure of 2 to 3 years experience, you're going to cherry pick this segment and work very, very specifically on reducing attrition here. So you're really picking up the core problems which impact business and then reducing it so that you have a great talent.